So what we're going to talk about now is what you should do, the next steps that you should take once you are done editing your newsletter. So what you do is you click Done Editing, and it will take you through to this page. So what I've done for the purposes of this test is I've added myself and my own email address as a subscriber to the list. What you will do when you have set up the account is you will have subscribers added, and I will show you how to do that in my next video. So what I always recommend doing is sending a test email. So what you should do is choose a group. This is something that MailerLite has introduced recently, is groups. So for example, if you're selling or if you're emailing someone about fire equipment, they'll be on one group, or that email will go to a specific section of your email list. If you're emailing someone about selling products, that'll be to one group. And if you're emailing them about fire tips and tricks, for example, or fire hazards or information, you could send to a different group if that's your choice. So if you're selling to wholesalers or to people who are going to resell, what you then do is you have a different email list or a different group for them compared to people that you sell the public. For example, if members of the public are on one list and your wholesalers and your retailers are on another list, because naturally you communicate different information to wholesalers and the public. So I'm going to show you about subscribers in my next video. So what you do now to schedule your campaign, and a campaign can consist of one email, and a campaign can consist of 2 emails, 3 emails, 4 emails, and so on. And yes, one email can also be a campaign. So what we're going to do now is review the email and the content and confirm. And what I always recommend doing is sending a test email to yourself first, so that you can see that all your links work and it appears as you want it to. So you can do a preview here, and this will show you how it will look on a desktop and a mobile device on the right-hand side here. So this is what the content looks like. As you can see, I haven't put any pictures in here or any images in here, so it looks rather boring. But once you've created your email and added images, it will look a little bit different. So this is what it looks like on a mobile device over here, and this is what it looks like on desktop. So once you're happy with that, you can exit. If you want to share your email newsletter, you can, for example, if you want to share it in your team at work, you copy this email, this URL over here, and you send it via email in your normal emails to a boss or fellow staff member so that they can preview the content. And you can, if you want to have a record of all the emails that you've sent for your own purposes and for records later on, you can save it as a PDF and download that PDF and save it in your records. For example, if you keep a folder, digital folder of January emails and February emails and March emails, you can save the PDF to that folder on your computer. So once you're happy with this preview, you can exit. And then what I always recommend doing is sending a test email. I've sent a test email to myself already. So you put in your email address. This is an email in my personal email. You just do a send. What I would recommend doing in this case for you guys is your own email address. So the person who is creating the email, send it to yourself, so that you have a preview of what it will look like in your inbox when you send it. And for example, now, if you want to send that test email, you hit send. So I don't want to send this one because I don't want to send it to Stuart, so I hit cancel. Then if you realize, wait for that test email to come through and preview it in your inbox. If you realize, oh, there's a spelling mistake, because the spelling mistakes happen to slip through, oftentimes it happens. You don't want it to get through to your clients though. So once you've previewed it in your inbox, come back to this page. And if you find that you need to edit the content, you can by clicking edit content, or you can edit the recipients. You can edit the info. Here, the subject and the sender. So say it's not about fire safety equipment, it's about fire safety tips. You can edit that subject line there, and then you can edit the recipients there. So next is the schedule. So if I have decided that I want to send it tomorrow or next week, you can do that so that you can plan your email marketing content and schedule better, so that you also then have time to get staff approval and management approval, so that you don't have to last minute rush these things, because a last minute rushed email, it's easy to spot. So what I would recommend doing is doing this 1 to 2 weeks ahead of time, depending on your marketing cycle and your sales cycle, and schedule it, and then get staff approval and get team approval and then get management approval for this email, so that you have time to go back and edit the content or adjust the content, and there's plenty of time for you to get a quality email. So you can choose to send the campaign now and you can click send. You can also send it later and set up a schedule, or you can deliver based on time zones. So what it says here, it needs to be set at least 24 hours in advance. So if you're delivering to someone in the States or someone in Australia, obviously, or someone in South Africa, you have, different time zones for those three people, one in the States, one in Australia, and one in South Africa. There's different time zones. So it may not always be best, if you send an email now, for example, 5 p.m. here, it's morning in the States, but it's very late at night in Australia. You want to adjust your sending time for the best open rates. So if you find that people are sort of general information here, people might be checking their emails at lunch. Some people check their emails first thing in the morning, and some people check them late in the afternoon. And that is a case of, your recipients might be different to the market norm. In which case, it's always best to test, if you're sending emails over to recipients overseas, test a few different times, 6 o'clock in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock in the morning, and test those three and see which has the best open rates. You can then next month test an afternoon email, 3 afternoon times, and 3 evening times perhaps, and see which has the best open rate among people in the different time zones, and then schedule those emails for the time that the people in that time zone open them. Then what I'm going to do when I eventually do your website is track the campaign with Google Analytics, because it requires Google Analytics on your website, which I don't have access to at the moment. So you can then click send. Once you're happy with your times that you scheduled, so time zones, date, etc. Once you're happy with that, you can click send. Because I don't want to send this email, I'm going to go back. And what you find is, I've called this one fire safety equipment. So if you go back to campaigns, this campaign, you'll see it's a draft, and it's called fire safety equipment. It was created at that time, and you can tell when it was created. You then have the option to edit and to create a copy here, and you'll see that the subject is done, the content is done, the recipients is done. You just now have to schedule it. It'll give you a progress, like a process like a manufacture line, for example, of where all these emails are in the process. For example, if you still have to do a subject for it, if you still have to do content for it, every time you do one of these campaigns, it pushes you through the step-by-step process of writing the subject, creating the content and designing the layout, setting the recipients, and then scheduling it. Each time you go through that process, each time you have to set up a campaign, it will send you through that process so that the system ensures that you don't forget anything. So if you decide that you want to write another email, I've created a copy. You can see that I've just hit copy. I can now go in and edit this. So if you want exactly the same design, but with a different subject line or different recipients, you can then do that. And what you can also do is when you create a campaign, you can choose a regular campaign, an A/B split campaign, or an auto resend campaign. I wouldn't recommend that, but auto resend campaign is basically if someone doesn't open an email, it then will auto resend it after a specific amount of time. So a week later, or 3 days later, or 4 days later. These are good for things like evergreen content, the content that doesn't have a specific time deadline. So if you're running a special, I don't recommend doing an auto resend campaign, because if someone doesn't open it today and it'll resend them the email a week later, that information, the special might have expired in a week. So you don't want to do that. And people who didn't open the email and receive emails and the information is out of date, it's not a great user experience for them, and it actually ends up being quite frustrating and is more likely to lead to an unsubscribed email person or an unsubscribed subscriber, person that used to be a subscriber, scrolls to the bottom of your email and clicks unsubscribe. That's the least desirable outcome of an email marketing campaign. An A/B split campaign is what's called A/B split testing. So all of your content is exactly the same over two, test A and test B, apart from one element. So this one element could be the subject line. And then you test which subject line gets more opens and views. You could also test things like a call to action or the content, where you write slightly different content in one paragraph for an email. I don't recommend changing more than one item per email or per A/B split campaign, because then you don't know what it is that caused the one to succeed and the one to fail. Or the one to be less successful than the other one. So when you do an A/B split test, you change one element of that email, whether it's images, whether it's the copy, whether it's the subject line. You change one item, whether it's including a countdown timer or not, whether it's including images or not, whether it's including a gallery or not. You test these things, and what an A/B split campaign does is it will send test A or version A of this campaign to part of your list and send version B of your email to the other part of your list, so that each person only gets one email, and you don't control which person gets which version. But once you send your A/B split test out, and you wait a week, 2 weeks, and then you review that data to see how many people opened version A and how many people opened version B. You'll then be able to tell, okay, that subject line was more successful than that one. That copy was more successful than that one. Those images were more successful than that one. And you can only tell this if you only vary one element. So I recommend only varying one thing if you do an A/B split campaign. You might not want to do an A/B split campaign, and that's perfectly fine too. You can continue the rest of your marketing and only use regular campaigns, and that is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. If you find that your emails are not being opened or there's very low reaction on those emails, then maybe try an A/B split campaign where you test a specific thing to try and figure out what might work better with your emails. And a regular campaign is basically what I showed you. It's a normal email that I've been designing now. And I think that's it for sending campaigns and the campaign overview. What I'm going to talk about in the next email is the subscriber area.